put in place a further report to look at a framework for payment of that compensation. That framework has recommended, given that people are sadly dying on a very frequent basis, that we should make interim payments. And so today we're announcing that we're making an interim payment of £100,000 to everybody who is infected or indeed a bereaved partner, and that we'll get that money out to them at the very latest by the end of October. It is an interim payment, so obviously when the overall inquiry concludes, which we think will be next year, we'll be able to look at what further compensation may be required to be paid in each particular circumstance. But for the moment, hopefully this money will bring some comfort to those who've been campaigning for so long.
Those campaigners, of course, Mr. Malthouse, would point to some 40-plus years of campaigning, in some instances suffering. They say it works out at around £2,400, £2,500 a year. Noting this is an interim payment, can you give us an idea of what the final sum might be?
I can't, I'm afraid, Nick, because it varies, obviously, from individual to individual, because this dreadful event had very significant impacts on people in all sorts of different ways. So it's hard to put a figure on that. But one of the issues that the inquiry will be looking at is exactly as you say. Why did it take so long? How were these people dealt with in the intervening 40 years? What did the NHS and indeed the government say and do? But for the moment, as I say, my job over the last month or so has been to make sure that we fulfil the recommendations of the inquiry about these interim payments, and that's what we're doing today.
Was it just bad luck for the victims?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think it was bad luck necessarily, but that is one of the questions that the inquiry is looking at. It wouldn't be for me to comment on that. I mean, obviously...
Well, that's what the former Prime Minister thought. It was Sir John Major, as he was then, said in June it was bad luck.
Well, look, the inquiry is going to look at how this came to pass. As you will know, Nick, this was back in the 70s and the 80s, and the health service at that time was procuring blood products from overseas. They came in and obviously were given to these people unknowingly on their behalf, and the inquiry will tease out all of those issues and come to some conclusion quite quickly. Sir Brian Langstaff, who's conducting the inquiry, is doing so with commendable speed, and we'll know more about these questions in the new year.
Well, yes, that was what Sir John Major said to the inquiry. At least your crop of Conservative politicians seem to be taking it more seriously than possibly one of your former colleagues, Ken, now former Chancellor Lord Clark.
Why do we have to go in such meticulous detail? It's just frightfully interesting, no doubt, but pretty pointless.
Pretty pointless, he said, Mr. Malthouse. Do you agree with him?
No, I don't. And when you read the testimony of some of the people who've been impacted by this dreadful event, it is incredibly moving. Families were devastated. People have obviously lost their lives. They've lived with crippling illness for many decades now, and so it's not trivial at all. It's a very serious...
A bit crass there, wasn't he, the former health minister?
Sorry, say again?
He was a bit crass there, wasn't he, Mr. Malthouse?
Yeah, I think those were unfortunate remarks. As I say, so my obligation now is to make sure that we fulfil the requirements of the inquiry. That's what we're doing today. £400 million just about now flowing out to these people who've been impacted so profoundly over the last 40 years. And as I say, it is an interim payment. There will be more to talk about when the inquiry concludes.
All right, while I have the benefit of you on the line, a couple of other questions. We're speaking on the day that, of course, many, your boss, effectively, Boris Johnson and others, have in part set themselves on a Thatcher to Mrs. Thatcher-style set of policies. Well, you seem to have got there. You've managed to get to inflation to the same level as it was in 1982. How much is the government to blame?
Well, Nick, obviously the inflation figure that's come out this morning is alarming for families up and down the land. And we're struggling with a global phenomenon. Like most developed countries, we're seeing this inflation into double figures caused by, the war in Ukraine, post-pandemic supply chain shocks and a general stretch on the energy supply system. Our job over the summer is to do two things. One, to make sure that the very large support package, the £37 billion that is currently flowing out of the door continues to do so and gets to the right people. But secondly, also to put in place, if you like, the kind of hand of cards that a new Prime Minister in just a couple of weeks' time is able to play to get us through in as good a shape as possible.
So what is in that hand of cards for him or her? What could they do?
Well, obviously, there's a variety of things, and part of the leadership debate, as you've seen, Nick, is about what a Prime Minister should do in the short and medium term to get us through. Now, whether that's adjustments to the tax system, whether that's direct payments that support people, particularly at the lower end of the pay scale, there's a variety of measures there that can be put together. We obviously have a very powerful tool which we can use in universal credit, a system that we put in place some years ago, if you remember, much derided, but actually was incredibly powerful during the pandemic, and is able to channel money, particularly to the lower paid, in a very efficient way. And obviously we have a debate to be had about the structure of our taxation system and how that impacts on families across the country. I think that the key thing to bear in mind, Nick, is that while we are talking about getting through what is a challenging winter, it's pretty obvious that the energy prices are going to stay volatile, shall we say, for some time to come. And so thinking about longer term solutions, I think, is going to be the key.
Would you support freezing the price cap?
Well, obviously the price cap is frozen for a period until it goes up. I mean, this is the Keir Starmer proposal.
Yes,
and I have to say,
support it?
I find it, freezing the price cap is likely to just delay the pain. As I think the IFS said, the cost of it is vast.
They say it's as expensive as the furlough scheme.
It would be expensive as the furlough. It would cost tens and tens of billions, possibly hundreds of billions of pounds. It would delay matters into the future. It might actually make inflation worse. So these are some of the issues that a new Prime Minister is going to have to tease out. We've got a difficult juggling act, if you like, which is one, to make sure that families are not afraid and get through the winter in good shape, but two, to make sure that we do not damage our economy and our national balance sheet to the extent that we have jam today, if you like, but porridge tomorrow.
In a few tomorrow's time, we will have a new Prime Minister. It could be Liz Truss. She said a couple of years ago that British workers lack application and need more graft. Very simple question. Is she right?
Well, we've had a productivity issue in this country for some time, as you will know, Nick. Now, that's down to capital investment. We just do not invest enough in machinery. But I think, there are lots of people in the British economy who work extremely hard. But I have to tell you, every single school report I ever had, Nick, said could try harder. So I don't think there's anything wrong with encouraging people to work as hard as they possibly can.
Can I take you to London? Reminding my listeners, of course, you were the Deputy Mayor in charge of crime under Mayor Boris Johnson. You served as Policing Minister in this government. You might not be aware, it's leading the LBC News Bulletin, a desperately distressing story, Mr Malthouse. An elderly man, believed to be in his 80s, who was riding a mobility scooter in Greenford, has been fatally stabbed. What does this say about the level of crime in London? Can I put it to you, what does this say about the stewardship of the city by Mayor Sadiq Khan?
Well, I did see it in the news, Nick, and it is a terrible event. And I know the police are appealing for witnesses to come forward as they try and catch the perpetrator of this awful crime. Obviously, London is a city that you and I know well and that has been plagued by knife crime in the past and seems to be in the grip of it again. I just hope that the mayor starts to take this as seriously as we did all those years ago and leans in hard. There are some difficult, challenging things that the police have to do to get on top of knife crime. There's a new Met Commissioner now who needs really strong political top cover if he and his team are going to do the things they need to do to get on top of this issue.
Do we need another Operation Blunt that was put in place by you, Mayor Johnson, and the then Commissioner?
So Operation Blunt 2, which you will remember, Nick, between 2008 and 2012, resulted in a massive fall in teenage killings, particularly in London. First year, 29. By 2012, that was down to 8. I would encourage the Met Police to look at exactly that experience and think about doing it again.
All right. On a lighter note, and goodness knows we need it after that tragedy, are you aware of events in Andover, which is in your North West Hampshire constituency, where the local councillors have decided a new town crier is not required because, quotes, there's not much to crow about? What's your view of that and of Andover?
So that's Andover Town Council, I think you're referring to there, Nick.
Yes.
And the Town Council has been providing an entertaining cabaret for the residents of Andover for the last few years. It's not an organisation which I have to say my party participates in. And let's put it this way, it does cause endless amusement to us.
But surely there is stuff to crow about in Andover, isn't there, Mr Malthouse?
Listen, Andover is a town on the up. We're building lots of houses. It's growing fast. It's doing well. We've got some big employers who are expanding fast, and we've just, frankly, the council has got a brilliant vision for redevelopment of the town centre, the Andover Vision, and we've just put in a big bid for a Levelling Up fund. So I hope my colleagues in the Department of Levelling Up are listening. We're looking forward to receiving some funding.
And lastly, you and I have talked in the past about football. You are a Liverpool fan. When a player I'm sure you supported as a boy, Graham Souness, says football, quotes, is a man's game. Is he right? Mr.
No,
Malthouse?
he's talking a load of rubbish. I mean, you've only got to see how the women's national team did recently to see that it's more and more a game for everybody. So no, it's not a man's game.
I do hope in the next parliamentary football game, if you were playing, I could get Graham Souness in to tackle you after those comments. That would be something worth watching. Kit
Yeah,
Malthouse,
I think he was
thank you
quite
indeed
big
for
on
your
the
time.
professional
Cabinet Office
fouls, wasn't he?
Minister, coming in and talking about this infected blood bank.
Thank you, Mr. Malthouse. Much appreciated.
First, interim payments of £100,000, and we'll look at that in more detail later.
Yeah,
in
it
the
was
show.
all over
1 minute
the
after
place.
8 News is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.